It's the fourth week of work on the roof, and with the new wooden beams on site and mostly in place, we now need to do some final work on the top of the walls so that we can start putting in the new layers and get some protection in place against the weather. Because the forecast for this week is even worse than last week, with a couple of storms likely to pass through and some days with rain in between. So we are back in another race with the weather, and we're going to need things to work in our favour, which isn't the best place to be, especially as a key delivery looks like it might be late. And when I arrived on Monday morning, I wasn't sure how things were going to look after a lot of rain on Saturday, but then a warm and sunny Sunday. Outside was looking relatively dry. And things didn't look too bad inside, where some parts were still clearly damp, but quite a lot had dried off. And up above, the beams didn't feel too wet. So it was looking relatively promising for our work that day on the beams and the walls. And when the team arrived, they headed up and started to get the final beams level and in place. By the mid-morning break, all the beam placing was complete. And as I checked how things look from above, the local birds of prey appeared to be doing something quite similar. After the break, the team would be working on the walls, so they would be needing mortar from Sam, and Miguel would be needing more stones. With the beams now in place, we would be filling in the spaces between them. Miguel working on the sections where stones would be visible, and Haggy working on sections where there would be a mortar finish and we could use bricks. And with Sam making the mortar below and Alu delivering it above, I got on with various tidying up tasks while following the work. There were some of the usual water duties for the mortar. Before having a quick break for a late lunch. Followed by some stone picking for Miguel's work above. And in the last hour, I was back to some more tidying up, especially of the rubble that had fallen through the old stairs space. On Tuesday, I had some off-site commitments early on, and 3 of the team opened up just before I arrived. Shortly afterwards, Haggy arrived with some more materials. And to avoid delaying their work on the wall tops, I agreed to unload those bricks needed at the side of the house. Although this was soon put on hold for some more stone delivery work from Miguel, which I would need to repeat at various different times during the day. Before the mid-morning break, the wall work was progressing well. And by late morning, they will be moving on to the last sections of the wall on the church side. While I was down below, there was an unexpected visit from a local watcher of the channel who was looking after his grandchildren because they didn't have school that day because of a local teacher strike. Vale, ¿cómo se llama?
Hugo.
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 ¿Tú sabes yo también es Hugo? Con
Anda.
un H, ¿eh?
Anda, con H.
Los dos Hugos.
Los dos Hugos.
Pequeño, más grande.
¿Y la India?
¿Y tú cómo se llama?
India.
India. Como el país, ¿no?
Sí, como el país.
Muy bien.
¿Y los indios de América?
Hugo y India.
Anda.
¿Y?
Joan.
Y Juan.
Muy bien. Very good. Anda, que no-
After the visit, I checked on progress above before my lunch break, during which the team almost finished their main wall work. And then Miguel worked on protecting two old tiles with air holes. While Hagi created a mortar ridge on top of the brick wall.
Trae mañana, no tengo problema. Ha dicho que necesita.
We had hoped to receive a delivery of brickboards during the day, but these had not appeared as we entered the last hour. So we were not yet able to start on the next layer above the beams as we had hoped. On Tuesday night, a big thunder and rainstorm passed the area, and when I arrived on day 3, I was worried that things might be too wet to start work. I was even more worried that the brickboards would be further delayed and that our schedule was going to take a bit of a hit. Thankfully, things didn't look too bad inside or on the beams. But there was bad news when the team arrived, as Miguel was not with them, due to a problem with his leg that he needed to see the doctor about. And with no sign of the delivery, we got set up for work on the cornices. Haggy to build up the final levels on one side, and me to clear the old mortar on the lower sections on the other side, which I wasn't particularly looking forward to doing. So I was doubly relieved when the delivery truck arrived just as I was starting. Seeing heavy loads get lifted up and placed on top is not the most relaxing thing to watch, and at times I was glad to be distracted by the views or by snails that were enjoying the damp ground. Samuel, the crane controller, did another excellent job, and the delivery was finished quite quickly. And we could get started with work on the brick boards, Haggy placing all the boards across the beam spaces, using mortar Sam was making below, while Alu and I unwrapped the pallets and delivered things.
As the work progresses, I'll be talking a little bit more about the layers for the phase 2 part of the roof, which is very similar to phase 1 but slightly different. Although the next layer is the same, and it's going to be a brick board on top of the wooden beams. But one big difference is that the space between the beams in phase 2 is pretty much always 50 centimeters between the beams, and A 70 centimetre brickboard will fit exactly across that space. But 70 centimetres is not a standard size that everyone supplies, and therefore we've had to go to a different factory and a different supplier before getting it to our local supplier to ship it up here. And somewhere in that chain we had a bit of a delay. But now that we've got brickboards of 70, we should be able to place them a lot quicker than we did in phase 1. And that's going to help us a lot because we've essentially got 2 days now before a big rainstorm arrives. And although we're a man down with Miguel struggling with a knee problem, hopefully we will have enough time to get all of these boards in place and get the roof for that first layer covered up.
And at the end of the morning break, there was now some blue in the sky and a hint of some sun as we headed back up above, where over the next hour or two we made good progress, which kept us all very busy and made it quite difficult for me to film what was going on. Once we had sufficient mortar and boards lined up for placing, I was able to take a bit of a break to check how things look and to have a quick and late lunch. Then I was back above for a busy last hour when we reached a couple of lines for which we would actually need to cut some boards down to size. And as the sky darkened, more rain was starting to fall. The rain had continued until late in the evening, but day 4 was due to be drier before heavy rain was forecast to return. So to make sure we made the most of our window,
I arrived an hour early just after sunrise to get things as ready as possible for a big push. As you can see, everything was still quite wet outside. And the uncovered parts inside were also pretty damp. Up above, my main prep work was to get the next sections above the beams as clear as possible. And because we would need some 1 meter boards rather than 70 centimeter boards for some sections, I wanted to get the right sizes in the right places in sufficient numbers. After the board moving, I got on with more setup tasks down below so that when the team arrived, they could get started quicker. And the good news for the morning was that Miguel was back on site. And once again, because we were all so busy in the first hours, I wasn't able to film as much as normal.
Okay, so I'm now back to measuring these larger ones to cover the space here, which isn't the easiest to film with one hand.
After the mid-morning break, with the team now well set, I left them to it and headed out for some new plastic sheets I thought we might now have time to use later on. And back up above, the team had made excellent progress with the middle rows, being able to easily place the 70 centimeter boards without any trimming required, exactly as we had planned. And with sufficient supplies in place above, I got on with some tidying below, making the most of the last remaining direct light before the final boards above made it much darker below. I then helped Haggy work on one of the few non-standard rows, where he was having to adjust both the wall edges and the board lengths. With only a few rows left to do, Alu and I could now tidy up the remaining piles of unused boards, while still supplying boards and mortar to Haggy and Miguel. And as Miguel and Haggy applied some final mortar to certain spaces and edges, the newly covered roof was almost ready for a final precautionary step to stop everything getting too wet in the rain forecast for the next day. And having worked a bit later to get things in place, I think the team were very ready to head out and head home. It's a long day. Overnight, it did rain quite a lot, and the forecast for Friday was pretty much for rain all day. So we were planning to do some indoor work rather than trying to put the next layers on top of the brick boards, removing all of the plastic sheets that we might have had to put back on later. And the main work for the morning was to be the removal of all of the indoor scaffolding, which would require a bit of reorganizing beforehand so that we could stack everything up more easily. With the first room emptied, we had a first clear look at the beams and brick boards from below. And the team will quickly on to the second room. And I could start tidying some of the floors.
y medio. Ya sacamos. Y así, aquí se sube, no allá.
With the third and final room cleared, we took a slightly earlier mid-morning break. After which the team started to move the majority of scaffolding outside. With the scaffold shifting complete, the team moved on to some work not related to the roof, but which we have had on a wet weather to-do list for a while, and that was work on the walls in the downstairs area. Where for one section I wanted to rebuild the stones across an old filled-in doorway, which Miguel would be working on. While on the other side of the room, Haggy would be building up the base of the front wall so that on another day we can finish the edges and tops of the window above, which we had left in this way early in the year during all the window work in case we had a day when we would need to do work indoors. While upstairs, Alu was clearing up the floors with the help of Sam when he wasn't on mortar duty.
Yatti! Tú no la conoces.
¿Eh?
Tú no la conoces.
Todo tiene nuevo. No, yo le voy a poner el nombre de uno.
No.
Cada semana pare uno y el nombre.
By early afternoon, the week's work and the early starts had caught up with me. But I was back shortly afterwards to see Miguel finishing his wall work. And to follow Haggy and Alu's progress before the end of the day.
A ver si me cuántos clavos de más habrá como lo suyo. Bueno, tú le das 10 euros y te ven 4.
And that is the end of work for this week, during which it has rained a lot, but amazingly almost never when we've been working. So the team have been able to make some pretty good progress. First, fixing the wooden beams in place and then building up the walls between each one. And then when the brick boards did arrive, we had 2 fairly full-on days as we raced to give the house some protection against rain that thankfully was nothing like as bad as I had feared it was going to be. So our day of indoor work looks a bit overcautious, but it has given us a chance for Haggy and Miguel to do some excellent wall work in there, and for Sam and Alu to make things a lot tidier up there. So we are well placed to make good progress with the new layers on the roof next week, when the weather is forecast to be a lot better. So please do tune in again next week to see how we get on.